I'm restoring an old Minimax SC3 sliding table saw. In this video, I'm going to walk through a pretty complete disassembly of the main unit. I don't consider myself an expert at machine restoration, but if you happen to have this particular saw, I'm pretty sure you'll find some of the information here valuable. And if nobody else needs this video, I'm pretty sure I'm going to need it when it comes time to put it all back together. So I got the machine moved onto a mobile base. It's probably not a permanent solution, but it will allow me to move it around more easily while I'm trying to work on it. I actually did plug it in and turn it on, and the motor does spin. I temporarily put this wheel on here and cranked on it a little bit just to see things go up and down, and I was able to confirm that this is apparently an actual riving knife. It goes up and down when the blade goes up and down. I want to take the top off. Here's something weird. These bolts that attach the top to the frame, a 12mm wrench is too small, a 13mm is too big. The right size appears to be 1/2 inch, but this machine ought to be metric, right? I mean, it was made in Italy. When I started the disassembly of this main unit, I started with the totally wrong approach. My mindset from working with a cabinet saw was that I would just take off the top so that I could get a better view of all this stuff inside that mounts the blade and all that. But that's not how this works. On a cabinet saw, the trunnions and the motor and all the various things here are mounted to the frame, and then the top is also mounted to the frame separately. So you can take the top off independently. On this saw, as far as I can tell, all of these components here are mounted to the top. The top is what's holding them in place. So I'm gonna need to disassemble this a little bit differently than I would if it were a cabinet saw. Removing the scoring blade was interesting. This is 13mm, which in fact someone wrote for me on the inside of this little door. But I sort of expected there to be a hex-shaped notch on the other side to put an arbor wrench. Eventually I figured out that there's a hole down in there, and this hole in the top is designed so that you can stick some sort of a rod, and that allows you to hold the arbor fixed so that you can loosen or tighten the nut. And the scoring blade is actually 2 little blades. These are the pieces of the riving knife assembly, which came from right there. So because it seems that I'm going to have to remove all these innards from their connection to the top with the top in place, it seems like the best first thing might be to remove the motor just to reduce the overall weight. And it looks like the motor attaches to this plate with 4 bolts. Well, I got the motor removed. The basic technique is loosen all of its bolts and try and avoid it falling. It's fairly heavy, so my shipping scale says 50 pounds, 4.6 ounces. So one of the 4 bolts that attaches the motor to this plate goes in from above, whereas the other 3 go in from below. And I guess the reason why is because that 4th bolt, which is still there, there's no easy way to remove it because there's that metal arm there that's right above it. Now that the motor's out of the cabinet, I can get a better look at the plate for it. 230 volts, 17 amps, 3450 RPM. I'm not really ready to deal with this switch. I will eventually want to replace it with a paddle switch. But I am going to open this up because I saw on another video that somebody found a manufacture date for their saw by opening up the electrical box. Sure enough, that's what I found in there. Looks like June 6th, and I think that's probably a 9. June 6th, 95. Inside the saw, there was a kind of a piece of duct work that goes from here to this thing that tries to collect the dust off the blade. And here is that piece of duct work. I'm probably just going to redo this or replace it with something. It's So I've obviously seen some maintenance that was done in a hurry with duct tape and the like. This part of the housing that tries to contain the blade and collect the dust inside the cabinet, it's held on by a bolt here in front, which is a hex nut, a hex bolt, and then from behind, I reached behind with a 13 millimeter wrench to get the nut, and the bolt and the nut also go through this piece of metal, which I'm not sure what that's for yet. The other side of this plate is held by another bolt or screw, whatever you call it, but this one is a flat head screw of some kind. It's sort of camouflaged. It's trying to blend in. I didn't even see it before. Okay, so I got this dust hood thing taken off, and I understand it better now. This thing that I thought was a screw, it has a slot, like it's supposed to be a screw, but I tried to loosen it and felt like all I was doing is just damaging it, and it turns out the reason why is because that thing is just attached. It's part of the plate, and likewise, this spacer is part of the plate for the other screw. Both of the nuts that were holding this dust hood in place had thread lock on them. In my various attempts to remove this plate, one of the things I did is loosened these nuts here. I'm probably going to regret that later, although I might have to adjust them anyway, because I'm pretty sure those nuts were part of the very precise adjustment to make sure that this plate is not touching the blade while it spins. Those nuts effectively become the spacer that keeps the right distance between that dust hood and this piece of metal. The piece of metal that I described earlier that I don't know what it's for, the hole for that piece of metal is threaded. Oh, and now I know what it's for. This is what keeps the riving knife going up and down with the blade. So this bolt here was serving two purposes. It's holding the dust hood in place, but somewhat more importantly, it's also part of the linkage that makes the riving knife work. These worm gears here, they're actually attached to the front of the cabinet. And on this side, they protrude in two places. One of them is here, and I don't think that's attached anywhere, but then the other spot is here, and this is attached. This shaft over here is where a handle goes to do the bevel of the blade, and there was a lever over here that serves as a lock for that, and as far as I can tell, all I needed to do was just unscrew it. So there were two machine screws here that were holding in this block behind the frame, and they were really hard to get out. I put some penetrating oil on, let them sit for a while. Unfortunately, they're horizontal, so the oil has trouble sinking in. I was able to get this one out, but this one, I'm afraid I've damaged the head of that bolt, and the Allen wrench doesn't really seat properly anymore, so I got myself a big problem. So this is a bit of a relief. That screw that I stripped, I grabbed a screw extractor kit, and it worked like a charm. Basically just drill a pilot hole, tap in this extractor, and then twist it the other direction, and it pulled the screw out. I did hit it with penetrating oil for a couple of days first, so that may have helped, but either way, I'm glad this worked out. The mechanism to deal with the scoring blade, the actual way to remove it is to loosen these two bolts. But at the moment, I'm having trouble loosening them. They're really stuck. I might have to hit them with some penetrating oil. Actually, all I needed was more torque. I switched from the little handheld Allen wrench to a hex head and a socket ratchet. Yep, this mechanism here, which has the arbor for the scoring blade, it was mounted by these two bolts into those two holes. So the belt for the main arbor is this one, and then the belt for the scoring blade is this much thinner belt. So I finally got this assembly removed. The aftermath of all that is that this thing is held in place by these two protrusions or pins or whatever you call them, and they rest in these little brackets, which are attached to the underside of the table. There's a roll pin that goes into a hole in the underside of the table and lines up this hole so that this bolt can go through, and this semicircular thing is where that pin rests. By the way, I somewhat regret that I ever removed the bolts to remove the top from this saw. But now that everything else has been detached from the top, I could remove the top. What I can say is that if I do remove it, it's probably going to need to be a two-person job or a shop crane. I'm pretty confident that I could not pick it up and carry it safely. In fact, I decided to, for safety reasons, go ahead and put the bolts back in to make sure that the table can't just fall off. And while I was pushing the table or nudging the tabletop around just a little bit to get the holes lined up again, these two shims fell out. So now I regret loosening all this even more because someone had shimmed this table, and I'm probably going to have to do that again now. By the way, I like to take things apart so that I can get everything working well and fully understand how it works, but I will not be removing the giant hunk of concrete from the base of this cabinet. Removing this gearbox from this large piece of metal that I really need to look up the name for required a 12 millimeter hex wrench on one side and a 22 millimeter regular wrench on the other side. That's two tools I'm not sure I've needed before. When I took it off, there were two washers or shims between this side of the box and that bracket. I am not enthusiastic about taking apart this bevel gear assembly. Those look like roll pins and I don't know. I'm going to see if I can get this cleaned up without disassembling it further. So we got the main arbor with its pulley, and then over here there's a pulley that is for the scoring blade attached to the other side of the arbor. And then tucked inside here, I'm going to find a couple of bearings. I bought some inexpensive pullers, but there just isn't space for the jaw to fit in. There's actually quite a bit more space than there used to be. I improvised a little bit of a puller by putting two screwdrivers I don't care about and very cautiously prying up, trying to apply equal pressure on both sides. And I made some progress, so it does look like this pulley, it just needs to slide off. And so I'm working it with the penetrating oil to loosen it up. I got this pulley pried up just enough to get the jaws of this two-jaw puller underneath it. And that is much better. There's the pulley, there's the gunk that was behind it, and I can see a bearing in there held in place by a snap ring. So after a lot of time trying to find a way to remove this arbor and being worried about breaking something, what's working actually is just tapping on this end of the arbor with a dead blow mallet and gradually kind of pushing it through. And finally, the arbor is out. Once I got the arbor out, I was able to reach in from this side with snap ring pliers and remove another snap ring, and behind it there were a couple of these sort of springy washers. Now I have direct access to the other bearing. The shield on this bearing has come off, and I don't know if it was in this state before I started pounding and messing with it or not, but if this bearing wasn't shot before, it is now. So now that I've got the arbor off of this, I now have access to this snap ring so that I can pull that and remove this plate. Yeah, I'm not sure my snap ring pliers were the right size for a snap ring this big, but I got it off. It did go flying across the shop though. While I was editing this video, I noticed two things about the process of disassembling the main arbor stuff here. And those two things are, one, I didn't film nearly as much of the time I spent in angst trying to figure this out. That was hours, and there's hardly any video of all the drama. But the more important thing is that I didn't really summarize what I wish I knew when I started. And so here it is. This is the main arbor, and in the end, all I probably really needed to do was take off this pulley, which I used my 2-screwdriver technique because I don't have a puller with thin enough jaws, and I still haven't figured out an elegant solution to that. After I took that off, all I needed to do was remove this snap ring, which was in this groove, and then tap the arbor through by tapping on this side. Because I think this snap ring was the only thing preventing the arbor from going back through this bearing. And that bearing can't come out because it was being held in by this large snap ring, which was in a groove inside the cylinder. So I think it's just remove this pulley, remove this snap ring, and tap, I think. So there's another one of these pulleys for the scoring blade that I never took off. This one's weird. I guess this hex bolt goes all the way through. Is the hole through the arm threaded or what? So penetrating oil eventually did work its magic on this. This is sliding out without any problems. And yes, apparently that hole is threaded. And of course there's another bearing in there with yet another snap ring. I'm gonna need a long socket to get that nut off. Yeah, 17mm deep socket. Now I just gotta figure out how to get that bearing out. That snap ring is really small and it looks odd. Okay, so this snap ring, it's not really that it's odd. It's, first of all, it was all filthy, so I couldn't even see the holes. And second of all, the holes are too small for any snap ring pliers that I have, so I'm going to have to pick up another tool or improvise. I was able to use a 3-penny nail just to clean out the holes enough to actually see them. This is the arbor, the little arbor for the scoring blade. There's 2 more bearings tucked away in here that I want out, so I got to figure out how to take this apart. It's similar to its big brother, the main arbor, in a couple ways. This is the flange where the blade goes, and then there's a pulley stuck on this end. And so like the first one, I assume that I need to somehow pull this pulley off and then probably remove a snap ring over here and then tap the arbor through this cylinder. But this is yet another case where pulling off this pulley is going to be tricky. I gotta think that my shop is missing a puller of some kind. The pullers I have, the jaws are just not going to fit in a gap that small. Well, my improvised 2-screwdriver technique doesn't seem like the right way to do this, but it's working again. And now I think what I just need to do is remove that snap ring and then tap the arbor shaft through. Actually, I'm not sure I do need to remove that snap ring yet. It's not sitting in a groove on the arbor shaft, so it probably isn't holding the arbor in place, it's just holding the bearing. Yep, tapping on that end of the arbor shaft is pushing it through, and this one actually is going a lot easier than the main arbor did. I was able to tap this little arbor the rest of the way through by using a little piece of a dowel. I think this is called a ring nut, maybe. And I further think that I do not have the proper tool to loosen it. So I found this adjustable pin spanner tool at one of the big box stores. Yeah, it's getting the job done. So that allowed me to remove this plate where the motor mounts. And I could also separate these two big parts. In the parts list, this one is called the arm, and this one is called the support. So except for a couple of little details, I've got the saw disassembled. These are all the parts, most of them anyway. A couple of the larger pieces didn't show up for the photo. Now it's time to clean everything up and put it all back together.